Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, I am going to begin a new series of videos by request, by a subscriber's request, to explain how I would run or how I do run AD&D First Edition. So I took that seed of an idea for a series of videos, and I've added a slight twist to it because I think it's very important to frame how you're going to run an older game system in the viewpoint or with the intention of introducing that game system to the modern player. Um, Myself being in my late 50s, and this being the game system that really did carry me through the first decade of my immersion into the hobby. I do realize that we have to bring these game systems that we still run and enjoy and have so much history with. We do have to bring it to a modern audience, and so that is what I'm going to do with the primary purpose of this series of videos. So I'm not only going to talk about what I have done in running AD&D First Edition, but any changes that I might make to my own process to make it more accessible to modern players. So this is just the introductory to that series of videos. So I'm not going to go into the nuts and bolts just yet. But I will do is I will start going through some of the materials that I would not run AD&D First Edition without. So without further ado, I am going to shift over to larger screen so that you can see. You can probably see right behind me. I've already removed all the books that I'm going to cover right now. Now I am going to be showing you the books as they were published, so in the sequence that they were published. And the reason why I'm doing that is because there was an intention by Gary Gygax in the order in which they were published. And that lends to really the first step in, at least in my opinion, the first step of introducing the modern player to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition. So without further delay, the first book that was released for this, and this is not the original cover, this is the second cover that was brought out. This is not the original one that I owned either. I ended up having to replace my entire collection some 40 years later. But the Monster Manual was the first released in this new game system. Now, I know that there's the popular and somewhat accurate belief that Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was written by Gary Gygax in order to remove Dave Arneson from this material so that he would not get any royalties from this material. And yes, that is partly true. However, it is also equally true that this is Gary Gygax's Dungeons and Dragons opus. This is the game system that he really wanted to create. And with the experience that he had gained, from 1973 through, 1978 or so, when these, or maybe 77, when he really started putting this to draft, during that time frame, he had developed an idea of what his ideal for advanced Dungeons and Dragons was, or would be, or even should be. So he released the Monster Manual first because he felt that the whole game system had to be built around what you were going to be in opposition to. And so once he had that laid down, then the next book that would come out is, well, how do you interact with those monsters and other creatures in the world? And that would be the player's handbook. So once again, not the original cover. So when I purchased these on eBay, I got the ones that were in the best shape and and still obviously first edition. So the player's handbook. So you cannot run this game system without the monster manual and the player's handbook. And then following that up with the Dungeon Master's Guide. So here, now this is the original cover. The Dungeon Master's Guide is the third in the series of release, and Gary Gygax was clearly making a statement that these first two were absolutely required, and then here you end up with some optional rules and some clarifications and everything. Also within here is the issues that are oftentimes attached to AD&D First Edition, where the layout and just the presentation of the rules gets somewhat muddled in this. It's not insurmountable, though. I mean, you can pick through this and you can get everything that you need to run this game and run this game well by using the Dungeon Master's Guide. And also, the Dungeon Master's Guide is the only place where you're going to get, treasures and magic items and all of that stuff as well. So it is a required book for running this game system. So there you have the three what are considered core books. The next that I really do think that you would need, and I would not run Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition without a setting. And that setting is, in my view, always the world of Greyhawk. So this came out in 1983, so that's from the box set. So absolute must, I would say. I would use Greyhawk for other game systems, but I would only run AD&D First Edition in Greyhawk, if that makes any sense to you. So I would certainly recommend getting a hold of this. What I really like about this system is that it, or this setting, is that not only is it so directly tied to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition in just the mechanics and the tone of the game and the themes and whatnot, but it's also so open-ended that you can insert your campaign within this world setting without disturbing very much what is already in its timelines, and so there's plenty of gaps within the timelines where you can set any campaign and literally run a long-standing campaign for decades without actually stepping on the toes of the lore of the world setting. So that's the next in the line that I would not run AD&D without. Followed by Unearthed Arcana. So Unearthed Arcana, now this is, I'm going in order of in which they were published, not in my priority order. But Unearthed Arcana adds a lot of additional rules and subclasses and everything that I think I'm plus much more unique treasures, magic items, and such that, I would not run it without this. Now, I would not use every single rule that is in here, and when I go to the individual video part of this series, when I'm talking about this book, I will actually lay out what those are. Which ones I discard, which ones that I use, and whatnot. Next in the line is the Dungeoneer's Survival Guide and the Wilderness Survival Guide. Now, I'm not sure which one, they both came out in '86. I'm not sure which one came out first. At least I could have double checked that. These are written by Douglas Niles. And what both of these do is, oh no, this one's by Douglas Niles and this one is by Kim Mohan. Sorry about that. What both of these books do is they add that extra layer of secondary skills and non-proficiency, non-weapon proficiency skills that help flesh out a character and make the character a little bit more more believable, let's say, and more differentiated from just their very base character class. So a first level fighter is not a first level fighter is not a first level fighter. They're going to have more nuance added to them once you start adding in some of these non-proficiency skills and bonuses and non-weapon bonuses and skills as well. So and they're geared towards actually adventuring, which is something that I think is really important to focus in on. Is that the whole premise of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition is that you are going to be an heroic adventurer, and heroic meant also along the alignment system wise that you're meant to be a heroic. You're meant to be good. You're meant to fight, the forces of evil. And this was very much in Gary Gygax's mindset for this game system. So, and there's a certain amount of challenge that comes with AD&D First Edition that, that, to be honest with you, does not extend beyond AD&D First Edition. It becomes a little bit easier progressively so in order to survive once you get to second edition and third and 3.5 and then 4 and 5th edition. So all of these choices that were made, not just in their release dates, but in the various layers of complexity added into it, are all purposeful, and that really does come through even at the player level when you are making your choices in creating your character. And I, again, will go into much more detail when I talk about character creation in AD&D First Edition. And then finally, if you do not have the Greyhawk box set, then this is the last book in the series, and this was 1988. So Gary Gygax actually was no longer with TSR at the time, but this is from James Ward, and it's a kind of a compilation of what came from Dragon magazines plus the original World of Greyhawk box set, kind of condensed down into one rule book here, and this is compatible with second edition AD&D as well. So that's the only one that I would say is kind of supplemental and not exactly necessary for running AD&D First Edition. I would probably just run it with the box set of the world setting, other than if I were going to if I just wanted the book as a quick reference. Now, there is also the Dragonlance world setting that is written to, written for AD&D First Edition, but I would run that totally separate as a Dragonlance campaign, and leave it at that. I wouldn't set. That's obviously not going to be set with Greyhawk in any way, and it's not something that I would normally do anyway. I played as a player through the Dragonlance modules back in the day, and as much as I enjoyed them, it wasn't exactly the experience that I would like to create as a dungeon master for my players. So, like I said, it was a lot of fun to play through them, but it wasn't exactly my bag, let's say. So, let me switch back here. So, what I'm going to do is I am going to go through a series of videos where I talk about various topics related to how I would run this game system for a modern player. And the first one would be to setting expectations. I think that anytime you're running a game system, you need to set expectations, and not just your expectations as a dungeon master or a game master, and what you expect of the players, but what the players can expect from the system. And so that's where I'm going to focus on with this here. There are some things with AD&D First Edition that, quite frankly, have to be cleared up. All right. Modern players have been exposed to the idea from Wizards of the Coast that AD&D First Edition is problematic, and that it is and they are openly not belligerent, but just openly toxic towards the AD&D First Edition, and how Gary Gygax, had written it, and the content that he used in it, and how they perceived it is presented, and I think with very, very little understanding of the purposefulness of what it is. So they've definitely poisoned the well of of what this game system, how it actually plays and runs, and what you can actually get out of it, in an effort to elevate their own product in relation to it. I at least that's my opinion. So you do have to clear that up with a modern player, because those of us that started with this game system, we know, that none of the issues that they bring up today we believed at the time, and even felt, or even realized, or even cared about at the time. We didn't have those kind of issues with a game, because the game is very malleable in the point that if there are some rules in there that you don't like, you don't use them. It's like, it just wasn't an issue back then. And again, I don't think that it's a genuine complaint against the rule system, or the way that it was written. I think that there's a much more nefarious purpose behind that. But you have to clear that up with the modern player. You have to tell them, listen, this is how it was written. This is why it was written that way, and this is how most of us at the time, and most of us today, run the system, And these are some of the choices that we make in making it not making it more palatable because it's not a bad taste to it if if you read through it and you actually understand some of the rationale behind the choices that they made. But it's certainly going to make it more accessible, let's say. Um, then the next thing that I would do is I would spend some time talking about the very specific rules that I will be bringing the players through in order for them to create their characters, and the very specific rules that they will have at their option, and the optional rules that I am not going to focus on, and drop out from it, as well. So I know there's been recently some discussion about like weapon speed and those kinds of things, and and I will talk when we're talking about the rules portion in this series of videos. I will talk about the various schools of thought that come from or involved with AD&D First Edition, because there are several schools of thought around AD&D First Edition as well. Um, then I will talk about what supplements that I use and whatnot, which I kind of covered already. And then I'll explain how the world setting really does tie into the game system in much more detail. So I think over the course of this series of videos, that you will get a general sense of how I run AD&D First Edition, and hopefully a good sense of how I believe it is both important to and possible to open this game system up for modern players to set aside those those false presumptions that they might have had imposed upon them, and instead let them realize of how there are parts of this game system that are truly great, and for most dungeon masters running this game system, uh, the parts that aren't so great we don't actually use, and it's a it's a fairly thing. I'm not saying that this is a great game system. I'm saying that this is a very, very good game system that has some greatness to it. It has some parts that you can certainly set aside and not utilize. And in my opinion, it is probably the best form of advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm not just comparing it to AD&D First Edition and Second Edition, but all of the editions beyond that, because all of the editions beyond AD&D Second Edition as well, so third, 3.5, 4, and 5, are far too complex to really compare them to D&D BX. All right, and this is a dramatic change from D&D, BX, the box sets, whether it be Beckme or Moldvay and Cook or Holmes or the white box or the original. So, there are certainly different, um, totally different game types that came out of TSR, all D&D related, but they're dramatically different systems. So in my mind, this is the best of the advanced Dungeons and Dragons variants that came out. I put this ahead of second edition, third edition, 3.5, 4.0, and 5e. Now that's certainly a personal preference, but I have introduced players to these older editions, both AD&D First Edition and D&D Beckme, more so in particular, and I've had very few 5e players say, I'm going back to 5e. Um, Most have really enjoyed either this or D&D Beckme, or my other big game system is Castles and Crusades, which I think is actually better than this, as a variant of Dungeons and Dragons, as a derivative of Dungeons and Dragons, and an advanced derivative of Dungeons and Dragons, which is also contributed by Gary Gygax. So it's not a far stretch to think that that game system wouldn't be, an improvement upon Gary's work in fantasy tabletop role playing games. So anyway, I'm going to leave this first episode here as is, and be on the lookout for additional videos in this series. I will, of course, gauge the commentary and the engagement and see how how well the series is doing across the board. So the next time that I see you for this series, I will be digging into the Player's Handbook and going through the Player's Handbook just on the portions of what the game theory is and what the vision was for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and then go into character creation and actually do a character creation utilizing the various sources that you need to use in order to create a character that at first level you will see is actually fairly complex once you take all of the different components and put them together. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. This is my first video of the new year, so Happy New Year to everyone. 2025, I think is going to be a great year. I can't wait to, I can't wait to get this whole thing going forward for 2025. I have so much planned for this year, and in 15 days, I will be at Philadelphia Area Game Expo 2, so the second year of that convention. I am a special guest at the convention, so I will not only be running games at the convention. I'm running 3 sessions of Shadow Dark at the convention, but I'll also be at a table for photographs and autographs. I'm not much of an autograph person. I don't think I'm that important, but I'd certainly love to meet you. And so if you're going to be there, definitely look for me. And I would certainly like to spend some time and chat about games and your favorite game systems and whatnot. And maybe you'll be one of the individuals that are in one of my games. So I have 18 players during the course of the 3.5 days that I will be there. And so I'm really looking forward to meeting you all in person as well. So you all have a great one. And once again, Happy New Year. And remember to subscribe and hit that alert button so that you'll see the future books and coverage for this series of how I would run AD&D First Edition for the modern player. So be on the lookout for episode 2 sometime before, most likely Saturday. So you will have a great one. Take care.